Welcome to the State of Us podcast with Ian O'Doherty, proudly brought to you by Rivada Space Networks. They're pioneers in secure, next-generation global communications, and with their revolutionary outer net technology, Rivada is redefining connectivity. They're delivering ultra-secure, high-speed data transmission for governments, for businesses, and for you. Rise above the clutter of the public internet with Rivada Networks, and learn more at rivadaspace.com. Now, let's get on with today's conversation. Welcome to the State of Us with Ian O'Doherty. This is my first podcast. You're my first guest, and it's a pleasure to introduce you. You are, of course, Graham Linehan, comedy legend, grumpy old man, and a rather controversial figure. Now, we'll get into the controversy in a few minutes, but for the moment, let's start with the good stuff. So tell me where you are now.
Well, I'm in the UK just briefly to pick up my visa. I have another trans activist trying to get me arrested, which I have to deal with too. And then I'm off to Arizona to work on a new production company. Well, hopefully. I mean, it's very early days. We have like about 5 episodes of a sitcom written that I think is very good. With a sitcom, the hardest thing is the premise. Like we kind of stumbled upon the premise in Father Ted. It happened to be perfect, and it also kind of aligned with what was happening to the Catholic Church globally. They were moving priests from place to place, and so that kind of gave us what we call what I call a trap. Sitcoms have to have some sort of trap that keeps the characters all together. And in our case, it was the Catholic Church, and the first trap was the Catholic Church, and the second trap was the island. So eventually we were able to describe it to people as the worst priests in the world on the worst island in the world, And that meant that's a very, very easy to understand premise. Once you start over-explaining a premise, you don't have anything. So now we have what I think is a good premise, and we're 4 or 5 episodes in and really enjoying it.
Well, when you mentioned Ted there, I mean, was it 30 years recently? Was the anniversary of the 30th anniversary of the first episode going out or something?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, it's still repeated on a virtually daily basis.
That's right.
On Channel 4 and More 4 and stuff.
With apologies.
With trigger warnings.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious. I mean, how did you find about this is the Chinese episode, isn't it?
Yes, that was one, yeah.
I mean, but that's the most anti-racist episode of the lot. Like, do you just laugh when you see things like that, or does it drive you mad?
No, I think it's another example of a kind of regime in power that wants to protect people who don't need protection. It's always done by white middle-class people for the benefit of people they think are inferior. You'll often hear no punching down. And what that means is that privileged middle-class people think that making jokes about other people is punching down. So they think of themselves as over those people. So, it's just another example of what I call the regime.
Yeah. How different was it when you were writing the first season to when you were writing the second? Because the first one kind of landed on it was huge. And it did actually have an effect on changing Ireland.
Yeah.
And like even the catchphrases are still there today.
Yeah, that's why I was so hurt when people didn't stand up for me when I started defending women and girls, I was shocked that, a country that, where Father Ted has become a sort of part of the Irish personality, in the sense that everybody uses the catchphrases and everybody, and the humor of it, it just keeps, people keep finding comparisons. Like, I hear you're a racist now, Father. I've seen that meme 1,000 times, applied to 1,000 things.
Yeah.
There's a careful now, down with this sort of thing sign at every single
Every protest.
protest.
Yeah.
And I was kind of shocked to be abandoned by the country so easily. Yeah.
And what about your mates? They abandoned you as well?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So just for anybody who's tuning in, just for context, this is all to do with the long-running battle that you've been having for women's rights and girls' rights, while being accused of being a transphobe.
Yeah, yeah.
Which you're not, because you don't care.
I know more trans people than the people calling me transphobe.
Walk me through that and go through the genesis of how that worked out for you.
Yeah, I just noticed that women were losing their jobs, were losing their careers, were being subjected to death and rape threats online. And I kept hearing the word TERF being thrown about. And I remember the first person I called out about it, and it was private, was Deirdre O'Kane. And I wrote to her and I said, why are you using the word TERF? It's a slur against feminists,
And just for the record, that's trans exclusionary radical feminists.
Yeah, which is a lie as well, because feminists exclude no women, including trans-identified women. So it's just a slur. So I said this to Deirdre, and she replied back, they hurt my trans and non-binary friends. And I thought, hang on a second, because I still thought trans meant transsexual at this time. And I thought, how does she know more than one? Friends. What the fuck's going on? So that's when I started to realize that trans didn't mean transsexual. Trans meant anyone who calls themselves trans. And when that comes to men putting on a bit of pink hair dye and trying to get into the women's toilets, that's when it gets dangerous, and that's when it gets it's just the most virulent form of misogyny I've ever seen.
It was the reason why I really wanted you on as the first guest, right? Was two reasons. We never liked each other.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We rubbed each other the wrong way.
And we knew each other as kids, starting out in hot press.
Yeah.
And we just never got along.
And you turned out to be the only person in hot press with a spine. Well, apart from Nick Kelly and Lorraine Freeney.
Yeah. Well, there you go. And actually, I'll be getting to Nick now in a second. But one of the things that I remember from, because we started out, we a lot of mutual friends, right? And who were kind of exasperated by the fact that we didn't actually like each other.
Really? Is that right? I didn't know that.
And I've had a bunch of them saying, oh, for God's sake, would you just be a bit more cool with Graham? And I go, no, he's a dick. I don't care. And they all turned on you.
Yeah, yeah.
All of these people who, like, you were 19, I was 16, I think, when we first met.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, was it? Were you only 16?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I was doing my intern the year when I started in operas.
Yeah. So I got to say something before you go on. Like, it was my side. I was the one at fault, because I was a kind of a snob, and I also kind of had a big thing at the time about the way hot press never covered any interesting music. It was always U2 and,
The Verdict.
Was there a band called The Verdict?
There was never a review of U2. It was The Verdict. It was The Verdict.
That's right. That's right, yeah.
But no, to kind of get back on things, all the people that we knew in common, right? We've been to their stag parties, their weddings, their handles, their, all of the major life points that they had. And I saw them all turn on you. These weren't your mates. These were your friends.
Yeah.
Or so I thought. And what terrified me was, Jesus, if they'll do it to Graham, they'll do it to anyone.
Yeah.
And to a name that you mentioned there, but Nick, a good friend of ours, fantastic journalist, and a much better guy than I ever was.
Yeah, he was such a sweet guy.
He was brilliant, but at his funeral a couple of years ago, I ended up having a row with our mutual friends about you, and basically you wouldn't have been welcome at that funeral. And I was like, stuff like that must have really cut deep with you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I kind of, the first time I realized it was happening was, I had one friend here, literally, after everything fell apart. You know, one friend, and he told me that, I think can I name names?
Go on.
He told me that Fiona Looney, who's a playwright who used to be a journalist at Hot Press, had told him he should never speak to me again, you know? And when I heard that, I just thought, oh my God, I've literally got one person left to talk to in Ireland, and this woman has told him not to talk to me. So I was, I kind of got a vision of that. And then I heard about that funeral. And Paddy O'Gorman, who is one of the only journalists with any integrity in
Paddy's going to be a guest on this. And
Good.
He's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, Paddy is the kind of person who interviews the women of Limerick prison who've been put in prison with an absolute psychopathic man named Barbie Kardashian.
Yeah. And
of course, none of these people give a damn about the women of Limerick prison being privileged middle class, you know, wankers. But Paddy told me that Arthur, who I wrote Father Ted with and who I loved for my whole life, said Graham gave up everything to be a darling of the far right. And I thought, oh my God, I spent so much time telling him that children were being mutilated, that women were having their careers destroyed, and he didn't listen to any of it. You know, I had the same experience with another journalist, Ken Sweeney, who I became friends with again, and he too, I would tell him these things, and I'm kind of used to a similar reaction from everybody. They sort of look through you. You're saying, well, you know, the youngest kid to be seen at the Tavistock was Irish, 4 years old, you know? They do, and you know, I might as well be talking about mice, experiments on mice, you know? And it for me, I remember the first time I realized I wasn't getting through to them, I was in an office with Jimmy Mulville and Arthur Matthews. We were talking about the TED musical. And I was talking about this guy who's the son of a millionaire in New Zealand. And he beat 2 Indigenous women at weightlifting, you know? This is an incredibly privileged man who beat 2 Indigenous women and now holds the women's world record for weightlifting, you know, in New Zealand. And Arthur and Jimmy were kind of sniggering at it. And I thought, they just don't care. Like, you know how Arthur loves the World Cup.
Yeah, of course.
He takes 4 weeks off when the World Cup happens. If there was cheating in the World Cup, he wouldn't stand for it. But when it's women's sports, doesn't care.
And come here, when was the last time you spoke to Arthur? Because, I mean, the two of you are kind of seen as almost
A team.
a team, exactly. Yeah. You know,
I thought we were, you know. But I realized that, you know, he once said, I have defended you. Well, he kind of defended me by saying, Graham Linehan's not a bigot. And it's like, well, of course I'm not a bigot. You know, but you have to go further. You have to say, of course women deserve fair sports. Of course women deserve single-sex spaces. Of course they shouldn't be mutilating children in gender clinics. You know, hundreds of kids, thousands, have had unnecessary double mastectomies. They will regret them for the rest of their lives. And because there's a kind of news blackout in every liberal country on this, you can't really, I don't know. I don't know whether they just don't believe me or whether they they genuinely think that 13-year-old kids need double mastectomies, but I just couldn't get through to anyone, you know? And Arthur, I genuinely thought, Arthur saw me, once I was on the phone with a woman in the civil service who was being threatened by a trans activist. And Arthur heard the phone call, and I was trying to help her, trying to put her in touch with people who could help. And he still agreed to take my name off the Father Ted musical. You know, he still.
Now, let's get into Ted the musical.
Mm-hmm.
Right, this was going to be your pension,
Yeah,
as you said.
yeah,
Right? So, you, Arthur, Neil Hannon, Paul Wonderful.
yeah. You only came on as a favour to Arthur. You know, like Paul had nothing to do with Father Ted, but Arthur, understandably, feels sorry for Paul. Wanted him to be because he's.
Well, no, careful.
Yeah, yeah. No. He understandably, you know, he just wanted to do right by his friends. So I said, okay, even though it made the contract negotiations an absolute nightmare, but we pushed through. We got it all done. Took ages, and then he was on. You know, he was working.
So for the first time, because people don't know, because it's been cancelled. Is it?
People don't know it ever existed.
So is it? Would it be fair to say it's cancelled or just indefinitely postponed?
Well,
And can you get the rights back?
no, because Arthur, Paul, and Neil own half the rights, and Hattrick own the other half, and they're all saying that it can't be done with me because I'm a bigot, and they're happy to continue smearing me as a bigot by trying to take my name off it. You know?
And when were you first told? Was it Jimmy Mulville?
Yeah, it was incredible. He brought me down to London. I was living in Norwich at the time, and he sat across from me and he said, "You either have to take your name off, or we're not doing it." And for the 100th time, I said to him, "Jimmy, young girls are being mutilated, you know, in gender clinics." And he shouted, "I don't care," you know. And that was it. I stormed out. I was so angry I walked out.
They offered you a lot of money to walk away.
£200,000. £200,000 if I walked away. And there were a few things that made me say no, I wasn't going to do it. One was that I said to them, I'd like to come in and just see productions, see rehearsals every so often to see how it's going. They said, no, we want to make a clean break. This is after years of Jimmy agreeing with me, you know, nodding along when I'm telling them what's going on. So I said, so there was a mixture of things. First of all, I wasn't going to blacken my own name by taking my name off my show. Secondly, I thought Arthur, Paul, and Neil would stand up for me. I thought they'd be on my side, but it was only when I got home I realized they must have signed off on this. There's no way they would have said this unless they'd all signed off on it. So, and so finally, I just thought, well, no, I always thought two things will happen. Either they'll cancel the musical and it will create a huge amount of publicity, or for the cause, which I think is the most important thing at the moment. I think the safety of women and children is the most important thing going on at the moment, now that it's under such threat. And the other was just that I knew it wouldn't be good if I wasn't allowed in. You know, I'm a details man. I've always been. There's certain jokes that didn't make it into TED because I said no, you know? Same with everything I've ever done. One of the things about writing is it's not just the things you leave in, it's the things you take out, you know? If everything in a thing is good, then everyone thinks you're a genius. You don't show them the mistakes. That's why I stopped putting deleted scenes on the DVDs when there were DVDs. So I wanted to make sure that the quality control was there. And they wouldn't even let me do that, as if I had done something wrong. And I haven't done anything wrong. They've done something wrong. You know, I think
Did you not call Arthur and Neil out on this? And you must have had conversations with them. I mean,
there was only a couple of things left. I rang Paul thinking, oh, Paul will be on my side because we did him such a favor and blah, blah, blah. And he was cold as ice when I picked up the phone. And I thought, how dare you? All the work that was put in to getting you on this show, which you have nothing to do with, you know, otherwise. How dare you give me shit over the phone? And he starts talking about, oh, well, gender non-conforming. It's not about gender non-conforming. It's about medicalizing gender non-conforming people, you know? So, so it was just a series of blows. And then I spoke to Arthur, and Arthur was useless, you know, I think scared, to be honest with you. I think he's just, you know, he's obsessed with Ireland's IRA past and all the terrible things that were done then, but he doesn't give a damn about what's being done now, you know? So with all that on top of me, I just thought, no, I'm not taking the £200,000. They're going to have to make it with me or not make it at all. And they decided not to make it at all. You know, they robbed London of a Father Ted musical in the same way that London was also robbed of a Terry Gilliam
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, show, because the fucking ice cream sellers at the Old Vic said they wouldn't come into work if he made it, you know? So, you know, instead of standing up for artists like Terry Gilliam and artists like myself, they just capitulated, you know? And I'll never understand.
Well, I think...
Ian, let me say one more thing.
Okay.
If someone had come to me and said, Arthur isn't working on the show, we're taking his name off the show, do you know what I would say? And I would hope any decent person would say, if Arthur's gone, I'm gone. Yeah. That's what I would say. But they didn't. They didn't, you know? And they let me continue to spin in the wind. This was after years of having my address released online by trans activists, the police coming to my door, sent by trans activists, being sued 3 times by the same trans activist who turned out to be a sex offender. I mean, this was like 5 years of being completely alone, 2 of them during COVID, and not a single person stood up for me when they could easily have said, as I say, women need single-sex spaces. They fought for them over 100 years ago. They still fucking need them, right? Women need fair sports. Why do you disagree? Who could disagree with that? And children should not be mutilated in gender clinics.
Well, it's one of the things I find interesting is that if you ask anybody about female genital mutilation, they say that they're against it.
Yeah.
And that it's a terrible thing.
Yeah. Whereas
but gender-affirming care, which is female genital mutilation...
Jazz Jennings in America, who's like one of the first trans kids, which is a ridiculous term, he was castrated on reality TV. Everybody watched him being castrated, and the show's still on. And while he was being castrated, the camera zooms in on the 2 surgeons, and they have an argument. They're like this, and the reason they have an argument is because they're experimenting on these kids. They thought they were going to be able to, and if you excuse me for getting into details, vaginoplasty means that they invert the penis and it becomes the new vagina, right? This inverted penis.
Yeah.
But they put him on puberty blockers since he was a kid, so his penis hadn't grown. So they weren't able to do it. As soon as he had the operation, something split. You know, he was in agony. And now he has to dilate this wound he has.
Yeah.
Something like 3 times a day, I think it is. And it takes half an hour each time. I mean, this is, the way I see it, right,
is when you see, sorry for cutting across there, but when you talk about Jazz Jennings, there's a multitude of other cases like that. That's not a one-off rare example. But one of the things I've had said to me by our mutual friends, and many of them have fallen out with because of this on this issue, is it's not necessarily that they don't agree with you.
Oh,
it's that they can't understand why you're that bothered. You know,
after the Second World War, the Allied soldiers went to the neighboring villages in Dachau and what was the other one beginning with B?
Belsen,
and they forced the neighboring villagers to walk through the camps and look at what they had lived next to. And I think all these people are living in the zone of interest. You know, they're living comfortable lives with comfortable careers, all because they are deliberately ignoring the greatest medical scandal of all time. You know, we've convinced a bunch of gay kids and autistic kids that they were a different sex and told them they wouldn't be happy unless they cut off parts of themselves. How could you not care about that? How could you not care about that?
And so you chose this as the hill that you were prepared to
Of course, what other hill? What hill is more important? What hill is more important than kids and women?
The personal cost.
I didn't realize it would.
Was enormous.
I genuinely thought when people heard that kids were being hurt, they would be like, "How can we help?" But instead, I had people demonizing me, writing articles about me, calling me a bigot over and over again. And my Wikipedia page has been kind of permanently altered. We cannot change the Wikipedia page. And it's like a whole page of every negative story that's been written about me, you know? And I just had my reputation completely destroyed, you know? But things are turning around now, so we'll see what happens. I have a feeling that I still won't come out of it in one piece, you know? Because I don't get much solidarity from others in the, you know, well, no, that's not true. Most people are really, really great, you know, and I've made so many friends from this, so many brave women and men. But, you know, it's just the latest court thing, having to go through that again. Luckily, the Free Speech Union is helping me, but, you know, it never ends. So I just want to get out of this country. I never want to see any of those people again. I never want to see anyone in the UK entertainment industry again. They're all, you know.
When we finish up here, you're flying to the airport.
Yeah. As fast as I can, I'm getting out.
What's your relationship with Ireland like now?
Non-existent. I want to get out. I want to get, the only reason I come back is to see me mum and give my mum a hug. And then I get out as fast as I can. I think Ireland is, and also I do think that Ireland.
Do you have no friends left here at all?
I have feminist friends, but you know, John Boyle, I guess, is something of a friend now. He apologized to me for his earlier.
Really good guy.
Yeah, he was a really decent.
He's a really good guy.
It was a decent thing of him to do. Should get him on.
Yeah.
But no, I just want to. I get in and I get out. You know, it's the same in every country, you know, like sadly, I was part of the media classes, you know, and it's the media classes, it's the middle classes, excuse me, if that, or the privileged classes that are running this stuff. They're the ones who believe that some men are women. They're the ones.
You see, this is actually the really funny thing that I've learned, and it's not funny, because there's nothing funny, about this rather awful moment in history. But you were Captain Woke, you know. You were the scold in chief.
I was an NPC,
you know, a non-playing character. But you know, but the thing is, you were very much a playing character because you were very good at scolding people. I remember you called me a talentless twat.
Well, when I got back on Twitter, I wrote in my bio, I reserve the right to disagree with anything I said before 2017. And I include that. Like, I've blocked so many people on the right that I just really want to go and find them all and unblock them, you know? Because for years, I thought that the right were evil. And when I say the right, I mean conservatives, you know? Let's not say the right, because that implies the far right. And also, the other thing I found out is that the left had started calling everyone far right. They started making all these subjects, including immigration and gender, unsayable. And if you said them, you were suddenly on the far right. You know, if you talked about them, tried to find solutions, tried to engage people in conversations about it, you were far right, you know? So I realized then that I had been, and I should have known, because I remember when they used to review the show in newspapers, they'd always talk about canned laughter, you know? We made every episode of Father Ted in front of an audience. I was very proud to get those laughs, you know? So to see it described as canned laughter by TV journalists, I used to think, well, hang on a sec, if these guys are lying, who else is lying? You know? About the Middle East, for instance. You know, what's the truth behind anything? if they can lie so easily about something and then go on to lie so easily about something about men can be women, you know? Like, if you're capable of telling a lie that big, one that hurts countless people, you know, then you can lie about anything.
Well, like, it's interesting you actually mentioned the Middle East, because we're widely, as a country, seen across Europe and in America as being the most anti-Semitic.
I wish Irish people knew how badly that's coming across at the moment. It is shameful. The fact that Israel took their embassy out, absolutely shameful. And you know, they all go, oh, with the bombings and stuff like this. People were out the next day after October 7th. I saw them myself. I saw them walking down the street with Palestine flags, celebrating the murder of 1,300.
Before any
While the bodies were still being collected, you know? So, excuse me, but fuck kneecap and fuck all of those NPCs, you know?
Well, I mean, the thing is, and I was saying this to somebody else, is that I saw the footage of October the 7th.
The actual GoPro footage that they filmed themselves.
The footage that they recorded themselves.
I've not been brave enough.
And even somebody, an Israeli friend of mine, said, you don't want to watch this. And without sounding too pretentious or too pompous, I thought, well, like, I need to bear witness.
Sure.
Know?
Yeah.
And
especially in Ireland.
But we hadn't gone as far as we have now back then, right?
Yeah.
So, but I remember that I watched the footage, and there's two things I'll say about that. Is that, A, when I got home, I got sick, and I have a strong stomach.
Like nauseous.
I vomited.
Oh, right. Wow.
Yeah, right? Because, and obviously I'm not going to go into it here. I'll never tell people what I saw, because I think it's private for the people who went through it. But what I will never forget is their laughter.
Laughter of the people who were doing it. The laughter of the...
they brought their laughter to the slaughter.
Yeah.
Right? And it was the laughter. And it's also, as well, it was that they really love killing dogs.
Yeah.
But I kind of think, and I think the Israelis made a mistake by not making this widely available. Because if people saw it, they would understand what the Israelis are going through at the moment.
But they shouldn't.
And instead now we got back into blood libel that the Jews are just baby killers.
Yeah. Yeah. They shouldn't have to show it. I know what you mean. Like, I couldn't watch it. The same reason I've never watched the film Funny Games, which is about two guys killing a family.
Yeah.
I don't want to see 1,000 versions of Funny Games, one after the other, you know? And the fact that people have to see something like that to develop a moral opinion on killing babies and families in front of each other. You know, I really think, I mean, as I say, I can't wait to get out. I can't wait to get out again, you know? Ireland first, which is really bad, but then England. Can't wait to get out of the
But it's interesting that you mentioned NICOP, because I can't stand them. You know, they're a bunch of spoofers, but I don't particularly want to cancel them either, you know.
No, but like, you know, you can point out how thick they are, like to call themselves kneecap, you know, and say that they're Republicans, when kneecapping was what was done to Catholic kids who annoyed the IRA. You know, the IRA would come to the mothers and they would say, he's got to come in to get kneecapped or we'll kill him. And so the mothers had to deliver their kids to get crippled. You know, that's what kneecap are. That's what they're named after. You know, they deserve to just disappear. I don't want to cancel them, but they should always be reminded that they're kind of joking about one of the worst things that was done to our own people by the IRA.
Do you think there's something wrong with Ireland?
That's a good question.
No, honestly, do you think, because there's times, and this is a question that I ask myself a lot, and I go, is there something wrong with us?
No, because again, these are the media classes pushing all these narratives. You know, it's not the ordinary people. If you ask ordinary people, I'm sure they will do the right thing every time. If you talk to some of the people we just met in the cafe there, they're not going to believe that you should be cutting kids' breasts off or getting hysterectomies when they're in their 30s, or 20s sometimes. This is just the media classes. This is just people like, Fiona Looney, Ken Sweeney, Arthur, all these people. And they both kind of strangle. Like I'll give you an example. I wrote a memoir a few years ago that described all of this, and it's still available. You can get it on Amazon.
Tough crowd.
Tough crowd. Yeah.
Available in some good bookshops, because remember there were others that wouldn't.
Yeah, no, it was hidden. We can't release the paperback because they're hiding the books. And if you, it's just paperbacks depend on foot travel or people seeing it in shops. So we can't release it until we're sure they're not going to keep hiding the books. But here's my point. Here's a memoir by the writer Father Ted. Why hasn't the Late Late Show interviewed me about it? Like the Late Late Show used to take difficult subjects and do an incredible job with them. Gay was brilliant at that. But now they just kind of pretend I don't exist. And they'll still have celebrations of Father Ted and go, oh, wasn't it great and stuff, but they won't mention my name, So I've been just made invisible in this country. And so anyway, but my point is the media, it's media classes, and the media classes are Americanized to the hilt. You'll see it when they talk about bathroom bills. Who says bathroom in the UK and Ireland? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They say y'all all the time. Y'all think this, y'all think that.
Y'all is a village in Cork, as far as I'm concerned. It's not a word for a collective.
Yeah, they all want to be American, and all of the anti-Semitism has come from America. The gender stuff has come from America. The DEI bollocks has come from America. I mean, can you believe there was an Irish politician who said that Irish people had white privilege?
Yes.
Who was that?
Oh, I mentioned that name afterwards. It was, and actually, it wasn't just one.
Yeah.
There were quite a few. But Michael Murphy, actually, brilliant journalist in The Telegraph.
Yes.
He's actually going to be a guest, hopefully next week. But he wrote a piece for The Telegraph the other day about Ireland and this kind of woke kind of nonsense. And woke is a word I'm not particularly comfortable with, because a lot of people who don't understand what woke is just say anything they don't like is woke.
Yeah.
So it becomes this catch-all phrase. Whereas, and I've been asked I wrote a piece for Spiked about this at Christmas, and I was hauled over the coals on Irish radio for talking to the neighbours about Ireland. This is the thing.
Yeah. That's always been...
But
they talk about the recent Supreme Court ruling, and they say, we're not going to take any of this imported stuff from the UK. But they take imported stuff from America. None of these ideas would have got anywhere if it wasn't for America,
But you see, this is, when you mention the media class and stuff, this is the thing that fascinates me, is that when I go into the newsroom, we'd all have certain conversations, or, you'd go for a few drinks with different journalists and you'd have certain conversations. And then you go to the shop and you talk to your neighbours, and they're completely different conversations with completely different people. And like when I met you yesterday, when I was heading out to you, taxi driver on the way out, Graham is brilliant. Tell him well done. Taxi driver on the way back yesterday evening, Graham is brilliant. Tell him well done.
Yeah.
A couple of journalists that I spoke to about this podcast, they went, Graham is a guest? Are you sure?
Yeah.
And it's like two different worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. They're just privileged people. Someone pointed out recently, the only, a lot of the people who are like really crazy about this stuff is people who've trans their kids. And, oh yeah, I know who it was. It was Catherine Bilbao, is that her name? The school headmistress. Yeah, school headmistress in the UK. And she said the privileged middle classes have all these kids who say they're non-binary and trans and all this sort of stuff because they have time to think about it, because they have money. They're not worried about where the next meal is coming from. So they worry about their special gender identity, you know? And it is purely a plaything for middle classes. No one else does. The working classes aren't doing it, you know? It's simply, I mean, you know, they always talk about privilege, but my God, is there anything more privileged than sitting around wondering if you're really a boy or a girl? It's nonsense, you know? And it's like that great phrase that I say great phrase, but now I can't recall it. But it's something like that. It's easier to fool an intellectual than anyone else, you know? And in the same way that
or as Orwell said, only an intellectual could believe something so stupid.
That's it. Excuse me. Yes.
Yeah.
And also, I think of it in the same way that con men in the 50s used to love going to New York because New Yorkers thought they were too smart to be conned. So they would swamp in, you know? And that's what this is like. This is like people who have convinced themselves. And that's why you will never see conversations about it, because they know it makes no sense. It cannot be explained. It cannot be justified, putting men in women's prisons and rape crisis centers. So they don't talk about it. And they make sure not to talk about it.
Let's say this all gets done and dusted tomorrow. Right. Let's say the issue goes away. Would you shake hands and move on with some of the people involved?
Yeah.
Or will you forever hold a grudge?
It's hard because, you know, I had 5 years of spinning in the wind, begging my friends to help me and to say one good thing about me and one useful thing to say about women's rights or children's rights. And they just wouldn't do it. And they let me. I could have killed myself 1,000 times by now. But luckily, the actual fight gave me strength. You know, I opened a Substack. I started writing about it. Now my Substack is about the only record of what happened in the last 5 years. I'm incredibly proud of that. And it really kept me going. And of course, I met so many brave people through it. You know, Maya Forstater, you know, Kate Harris, the LGBT Alliance.
One of the things I found really interesting is that this whole debate has brought so many disparate people together.
Mm. Yes. Good for a writer too.
Yeah. But they're all united only on this one belief.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have different other beliefs, you know?
Yeah.
It's just, but the one thing they're unified on is basically biological common sense, you know? But you'd be the second highest profile critic of this. Or as I would probably say, you've been the second highest profile defender of women and gay people, basically, because it's an incredibly homophobic movement.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But,
lesbians with dicks.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. It's just, but yeah, you don't seem to have any relationship with, say, J.K. Rowling.
No. She never mentions me. I wrote a letter defending her that was signed, that we went to great trouble to get signed by people like Tom Stoppard and John Cleese and various other kind of luminaries. But I think I'm being briefed against, you know. There's a few people who really don't like me on my side. And so I don't get any solidarity really from certain people. But it's okay because, you know, I'm friends with the LGBT Alliance and I'm friends with the Free Speech Union and so many people.
But it's funny because I know that you're friends with James Dreyfus and he's friends with J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's...
Well, he hasn't been briefed against. So, you know, it's fine. It's like, you know, one of the things I thought was, I'll get, you know, when the book comes out, I'll get nice reviews from people like Janice Turner and stuff like that. But she savaged me, not on the basis of the book, which she obviously hadn't read, but just on the fact that I won't use. I think her big problem with me is that I don't use preferred pronouns, because I think preferred pronouns is a slippery slope to letting men into women's prisons. You know, so you know, who knows, but it's another reason why I'm glad to get out. I have to say, because sometimes the politics of all this can be wearing, you know, and I'd rather do it somewhere where, you know.
So you're in the States.
In Arizona, you don't hear any of this stuff.
You're in the States now Rob Schneider and Andrew Doyle. I have this image of the three of you living together in a house, like some really
It's close.
like some really weird sitcom.
It's close. We're in an apartment building together. And
Really?
And I put down the last item of furniture, and then had to come back to the UK to get sorted out with my visa and stuff. So I'm desperate to get back. And sit down and play PlayStation games and write comedy again. But
Good weather.
good weather, great weather, but very oppressive at the moment. We'll be spending a lot of time indoors at the moment. It's the I think it's the hottest state.
Right, yeah. And come here, how do you find the States now since Trump took over? There was a time, Graham, where I remember you would have been spitting bullets.
I went into a depression when Trump first won. I spiraled. I think that was actually because it was around the same time I had my cancer operation and the trans thing kicked off. So I went on venlafaxine, which is an SSRI, and I've been on that for 5 years. And it's really, to be honest with you, it probably is the thing holding me together. I hate him.
Explain that, sorry. Explain that. What's
venlafaxine?
yeah?
It's just an antidepressant drug. It
Right.
keeps me chipper, makes me able to do interviews like this.
Okay.
It's not great, and I don't want to be on it forever. But every time I tried to come off it in the UK and Ireland, something else would happen to make me need it. So I'm hoping that when I get to the States, I can gradually come off it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to go back anyway to when Trump was elected.
Yeah,
and
he
you
was elected.
spiraled.
And I stayed up all night because I was so shocked. I still wish I had that sleep back, And I met my son in the morning, who I had been fucking filling with, he's the worst, he's the most evil. And I said, I'm really sorry, but Trump won. And he said, you're joking. He was really young at the time. So then there were 4 years of me going, when is Trump going to? But then I realized a number of things at the same time, how insane the left had become, how much they were lying, and so on and so forth. So when the second time came around, I noticed that, he was assembling what seemed like a pretty good team. I like a lot of the people behind Trump. And also he seemed to change. He's not as mad as he used to be. He's not as boastful, he says less and he's wittier when he says it. So
He's a funny guy.
he can be really funny.
People don't give him the credit for that. He's actually a very funny guy. But I think one of the best lines that I heard was an American journalist, Michael Brendan Doherty, and he said, the thing to get Trump, the trick is you take him seriously, but you don't take him literally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's a kind of a nuanced thing, but it's, you have to take him seriously. He's a serious dude, but you don't take everything he says literally.
Yeah, sure.
And,
But also, the last 5 years, it wasn't Trump who got rid of Title IX,
Yeah.
and put men in women's sports. That was Biden, and the idea that Biden was compos mentis towards the end there, was a lie that was being held up by the entire media over there.
Well, the moment I knew was, I don't know if you watched the debate when Trump
I did,
died.
yeah.
And there was a moment where Trump looked like he felt sorry for Biden.
I remember it well. He said, his only joke of the evening, he said, I didn't understand that. I don't think he did either. And usually he would be giving them both barrels.
Yeah.
But he held back.
He held back.
Yeah. He must have been advised.
It was sad to see.
Yeah.
It was sad to see the decline of any person. But not sad to see the decline of the Democrats.
Yeah. No, they can.
Because they're,
Yeah.
And there was an interesting thing of the 1,000 people who were working on the Kamala campaign. They all had college degrees. There was no blue collar person, and they just couldn't understand
Yeah.
working class concerns.
Yeah. Again, why should they? It doesn't affect
And they all use their pronouns.
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing is, one of the reasons why Trump won And it was a brilliant slogan. Was Kamala is for they, them.
Not for you. Yeah.
Trump is for you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it was because people don't care about this shit. Most people, and again, it goes back into what you were saying about, it's a middle class luxury belief because the working class have more important shit in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're worried about paying the mortgage, making sure that the kids are going to be fed.
But believe me though, the vast majority of people would care about this if they knew what was going on. Like I bet most Irish people only found out today that a 4-year-old child from Ireland was one of the patients at Tavistock. Because I once asked a room full of journalists the same question. Did you know that? And no one put their hand up. You know? So this basically, and I'll give you one more. Can I give you one more example from my own experience? So the Times, the Irish version of the Times, rang me. We're sympathetic. We want to get you a real story. Blah 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 blah. So I spoke to this guy on the phone from Scotland for about an hour and a half, something like that. Really long time. And again, you know, you have this weird feeling that they're not really taking it in when you're talking about the kids having double mastectomies and all this stuff. It's not really. He keeps saying to me, "What about Enoch Burke?" You know, and I didn't really know what was going on with Enoch Burke at the time, especially because there was this really concerted effort to paint him as the problem because he, you know, and I know the family are mad, but like I could tell that they were trying to deflect. Every time he spoke about pronouns and stuff, they would change the subject. I saw that happen on one press conference with him. But I really didn't know much about the case. So one of my rules is I don't talk about anything if I don't know about it, you know? But he kept asking, Enoch Burke, what about Enoch Burke? And finally he said something like, would you say you and Enoch Burke are strange bedfellows? And I said, yeah, I guess so, you know? That was the headline, you know?
Yeah.
That's what they were looking for. So that's what the media is. That's what the media is, not just in Ireland, but in England, in America. And I fully endorse completely burning it down and starting again, you know? And that's why I love things like this podcast, things like Spiked and The Critic. I love things that tell the truth, you know? And I despise things that lie. The BBC, I would have gone to the barricades for the BBC. And now I would like to see it all burned down, you know? Not literally, of course. That's the headline. They'll go with.
Well, when I met you yesterday, you were going off for dinner with your mother. How's she been through all of this? Must have been tough on your family.
Yeah, she reads the most awful things about me. My dad died a couple of years ago, and she really misses him. And my dad didn't, you know, he would. One person who shouldn't have done it rang my dad but anyway, and gave him a kind of, luckily my dad would always speak to me about it and he knew what was going on. My mum didn't understand it at first, but the longer she went on, especially, I'll tell you the funniest thing that happened. When they tried to get the word mother out of the Constitution, my mum perked up her ears like nothing else. And all her friends were agreed. They all voted against it. And suddenly she kind of saw what I was talking about. That it's not an exaggeration. They really are trying to destroy the category of woman through using misleading language and calling certain things offensive, you know? Like the amount of women I've told, they were in groups about things like, you know, menstruation, and they weren't allowed to talk about certain things because there was a man in there pretending to be.
But have you not, like, some of the words that, when they're trying to remove the female gender, is like
cervix haver, menstruator, front hole.
That's disgusting.
I know.
That is like,
and they don't.
That's like something some horrible, grotty 13-year-old boy would come up with.
Yeah, and it's in NHS documents. You know,
it's incredible.
It really is.
You kind of go.
They hate women.
They really do.
They hate women. You know, and it's not like it's not a desire to be like a woman. It's envy of real women. They, you know, and this isn't all of them. You know, there's a lot of trans-identified men I know who are completely sane. They know they're men. They just say, I like wearing
They're transvestites.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, some of them are actual transsexuals,
Okay.
The thing that happens a lot, I think, is that people still think we're talking about transsexuals in general, but we're not. We're only talking about something like 93% of men, trans-identified men, are transvestites. They're not transsexuals, right? So they keep their penises because for most of these men, it's a fetish. It's a fetish from what a coincidence, right? That the internet comes along with porn on tap, and a few years later, this movement comes along. What an interesting coincidence.
What are the odds?
What are the odds of that?
Yeah.
So it's like, and unfortunately, the problem is the intricacies of this and the details of this are sometimes pretty grim. So people don't want to think about it, don't want to look at it directly. And I understand that to some extent. But, sometimes you have to man up or woman up and stand up for your kids and stand up for the other women in your life. You know what I mean?
Why do you think so many women support this movement? I mean, is it suicidal empathy?
I think it's a form of that. I think it's also, apparently, in years gone past, women will often go with the social order, with the prevailing orthodoxy, because they have to protect themselves. Their social circles are very important to them, And I have a feeling that some of the men, like Jimmy Mulville once said to me, I love this. He said, my wife says it's not a problem. Jimmy Mulville, is a producer.
Yeah. You want to explain?
Yes, did we? He said, my wife says it's not a problem. Of course your wife says it's not a problem. You're a millionaire. You live in a house with the best security you can afford. What about women in prison? They think it's a problem. What about a woman in a shelter? She thinks it's a problem. But of course your wife doesn't think it's a problem, because your wife is a coddled, privileged, woman living in a very nice part of London in the year 2025. So yeah, it's suicidal empathy, but there's a number of other things in it. And I know if I was a woman, I would not like to lose my entire social circles, as I have. It would have far more effect on me if I was a woman. So I do understand, to some extent, they're just trying to protect themselves, which is another reason why men should be entering into this debate and fighting it, because it's harder for women. And women also get far worse abuse. Like the abuse that Rowling gets is, or my friend Helen Stanland. I don't get rape threats, but they do. So it's just tougher on them, and it's more socially isolating, and yeah, there's a lot of things going on there.
But I find even with my wife, she's smarter than I am, but she kind of looks at me sometimes and goes, why are you getting involved?
Yeah.
Yes. But I think, again, it's a reminder, and it's interesting given the debate that we're talking about. Men are different.
Yeah.
We're wired differently. I have no problem losing friends.
Yeah.
As would be perfectly obvious to anybody who knows me, and perfectly obvious to you. But you're the same, I mean, that when it comes to...
I wouldn't say... it did hurt, it really hurt. I'm just over it now. And as I say, I'm on these antidepressants that help, but it hurt terribly. I didn't want to lose my friends, but none of them have any courage.
Did you ever think of contemplate suicide?
Every time I say that, then I get lots of people saying you should have done it and stuff like this. So I don't really want to go into that. But I'll tell you an interesting thing that happened to me. I was talking to Stella O'Malley, who's doing brilliant work.
Yeah,
in due respect. Yeah. Again, you should have her on. She's great. Great talker. But she said to me, I was saying, I was on holiday and I was looking at, I was kind of just playing around with how I would do it if I could do it, And she said, don't do that. And I said, why not? And she said, that's how it begins. That's how,
really,
even if you're joking with yourself. Yeah. You know, it's just indulging in any kind of, you know, oh, what if I, you know, I don't know, stuck a camera up my ass. Sorry, it's the only thing here, so it's the first thing I thought.
At the funeral, though, it'd be media and the eulogy. It's how he wanted to go.
Always a director. Yeah.
But listen, come here, I'm going to wrap things up. But here's the big question. Ted, the musical. What happens? Tell me.
I tell you, I've been thinking about this. There's still a little bit of me that thinks maybe it will get done, but I think I have to kill that and then just leave and leave it all behind. Basically, Ted is asked to be a ringer and made a cardinal, so he will give the deciding vote on the next pope. Okay? This was written years ago. So
it's perfectly timed.
It is.
Yeah,
it would be
very topical now, actually.
Yeah, maybe we can get it out in a few days. And he becomes a cardinal. So the first half happens on Craggy Island because we thought people want to see the Craggy Island house, you know. So we were going to recreate that. And there's a lot of jokes in it. Like, you know, we have two, obviously it's not Dermot and Ardle, right? Because Dermot's gone and Ardle would, you know, he's like a 50-year-old man, like we all are now, you know, or a bit younger, probably. So we had a kind of a version of both and a version of Mrs. Doyle. And I remember Dougal as a joke, he says at some point, he says something like, Ted, it's 2025, even though I'm still only 33, you know?
Right.
So it makes fun of the whole thing. And Ted goes to the Vatican then, and then it becomes more of a kind of a musical, flashier. And there's a great scene where they come to Vatican City where it's all, you know, it's done like on the town, you know?
Oh, right.
Yeah. and the paper boys are priests and they're selling papers, you know, and even the tramps are priests, you know, in Vatican City. And then Ted gets involved in a sort of Da Vinci Code type thing with Polly Clark, who is the novelist who wrote Bejeweled with Kisses. Good luck with the book. She's now a nun, but she's a journalist nun, and she's covering a story of corruption inside the Vatican, you know? So they realize together what's going on, that Ted's just been brought in as a ringer.
I'm sorry, who played Polly Clark again in Fantasy?
Who told you that's me?
Oh. Okay, fine.
Someone very famous, and I do apologize, but I've forgotten her name.
Yeah, because she was gorgeous.
Oh, she was great. She was so lovely and so funny and sweet. Perfect for the role. So we were thinking about her, and we get them back together. So Ted and her start investigating, and they find out that there was a priest who was known as the nicest priest ever, and he should be pope, something like that. There was still a bit of rewriting to be done, you know. And God, I'm loath to give away the ending, but
you're here. Do it. Tell me.
All right. So they find out that priest is Jack.
The nicest priest.
Yes, except it was before he started drinking. So when people realize this, they vote for Jack to be the next pope. So Jack becomes the And we had Jack talking like Frank Kelly really talked, because we were always guilty that we never gave Frank Kelly more to do. Gave him 4 lines of dialogue, 4 words, and stuck him in a corner. And I think we'll burn in some sort of director's hell for that, you know. Luckily, he loved the jokes he did have, and he really put everything into them. And he phoned me until the end, you know. He was a lovely, sweet guy.
Yeah.
But
he's serious, man.
Yeah, but also a raconteur.
Yeah.
So when Jack stops drinking, he turns into Frank Kelly, you know, turns back to Frank Kelly. And he's very wise and very funny. Very wise and very good. You get the sense he's going to be a good pope. And then also the romantic thing is developing between Polly and Ted. But it can't happen because she's a nun and he's a priest, you know. And then Dougal comes down, and Ted finds to his horror that Dougal has been working on Vatican III, the new set of rules for Catholics. And all through the thing, Dougal's been talking about, can't wait till we're a bit older, we can all get married. And Ted keeps saying, priests cannot get married. And then at the end, he picks up the Vatican III and he goes, I told you, Dougal, priests cannot get... And he looks at the thing and he goes, Dougal. And he hugs him. And the scene swirls around and it goes back to Craggy Island. And Ted is getting married to Polly Clark. And Dougal is doing the ceremony. And Father Jack comes on in the Pope Mobile and he goes, feck, arse, drink, you know? And everyone goes, and he goes, I'm only joking.
He's sweet.
Yeah, that was the ending. And we wanted it to have in the service, because we were coming out of COVID, I wanted to have everyone stand up and turn to, and Ted say, let us all now offer each other a sign of peace. And they all turn and shake hands with each other, which I thought would be a lovely moment for people, you know?
And was Damo in it as well? And I heard.
Damo?
Father Damo.
Oh, yeah, Father Damo's in it. There was a great ending where Dougal, another one of Dougal's mistakes is he thinks the Vatican is something to do with Louis Walsh. And it was written a while ago, and X Factor, you know? So he keeps talking about boy bands. And in the end, Ted is sneaking to steal something off someone and to do with the plot, you know. And Dougal and Damo and two other young priests form a temporary boy band and sing a song called Look Over There to distract everyone from what Ted is doing. Look over there. You know, and we had a fantastic song. We had a fantastic song called You've Won a Thing. And within weeks of me saying I wouldn't take my name off it, Neil Hannon sold it to Paddington 2.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
My God.
So that's who I had as friends, you know? And that's the Father Ted. That's the ending we could have given the whole Father Ted story. And they stole it from not just me, but everybody.
Well, do you think we'll ever see it, or is it gone?
Well, I've just ruined it, so it's almost not worth doing anything.
That's hardly, but...
I don't know. I mean, you know, like the way I don't want to work with those people ever again. You know, I don't want to see them. But I'd still go for my original demands, which was to see it every so often, make sure it's doing well, make sure it's coming along, then they can do whatever they want. Unfortunately, I've had my hope crushed so many times about it that I can't invest any more emotion in it. I would just have to let it just happen and keep an eye on it. Be an executive producer, I guess, but I wouldn't want to work with any of them. I wouldn't want to work with Arthur or Paul, Neil or Jimmy. You know, I think they behave disgracefully.
Well, to wrap it up, I would say that in all the years we've known each other, from when we were kids in operas, and in all the years that we haven't liked each other,
I think it was my fault. I really do.
Oh, listen, I mean, I was a little prick as well, you know what I mean? So it's fine. But you're a brave and honourable man.
Oh, thanks, man.
And it takes guts. And you should be, and history's coming around. You're an inspiration to an awful lot of people.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
And not just the taxi drivers, I know, you know.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, you stood your ground. And now you're in the States and you're writing a sitcom with Rob Schneider.
Mm-hmm.
You know, life is good, man.
Yeah.
Life is good.
Well, you know, it took a long way. It was a weird way round to get there. But I'm doing that thing of writing comedy by a swimming pool, which was always... So yeah, I'll see how it goes.
Let me know how the sitcom goes.
I will. You'll be the first
one. This is the reason why I wanted you to be the first guest.
Yeah.
Of the State of Us. And so I appreciate you coming. And I just love how Ted sounded, the musical. Like that,
It would have been great. It would have been a beautiful thing.
Would have been a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I forgot to say. Did I say that Ted? Yeah, Vatican III allowed priests to get married. I did say that.
Yeah.
That's okay, good. Yeah, no, it would have been a beautiful thing. But sadly, I came along just as theatre was being captured by this craziness. And what can you do? You know?
What can you do? Anyway, Mr. Linehan, young man, you have a flight to catch.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty.
So thank you for coming in.
Cheers.